Hello everyone, my name is Clarissa Cano and I am going to be presenting on the second part of social perception. So this week we have looked at the continuation of social perception, which include different types of stereotypes, prejudices, and discriminations. Before diving into the different areas of these topics, I want to briefly go over what each one means. So breaking down our terms. Stereotypes is a belief or association that links a whole group of people with certain traits or characteristics. Prejudice is negative feelings toward persons based on their membership in certain groups. And discrimination is behavior directed against persons because of their membership in a particular group. It is extremely important to understand the complexity and causes of stereotypes, prejudices, and discrimination to improve our diverse world and help march towards progress in the right direction. So one of the most common types of discrimination and prejudice is sexism. And sexism is based on a person's gender or institutional and cultural practices that promote the domination of one gender over another. A very common form of sexism is ambivalent sexism, which is a form of sexism characterized by attitudes about women that reflect both negative, resentful beliefs and feelings and affectionate and chivalrous but potentially patronizing beliefs and feelings. Under ambivalent sexism, there's two elements: hostile sexism and benevolent sexism. Hostile sexism is negative, resentful feelings about women's abilities, values, and challenges to men's power. And benevolent sexism is characterized by affectionate, chivalrous feelings founded on potentially patronizing belief that women need and deserve protection. So gender stereotypes are distinct from virtually all other stereotypes in that they are often prescriptive rather than merely descriptive. So under sexism, there is also objectification and double standards. So women are all too often treated in an objectifying manner, specifically in the advertising industry. Over-sexualized imagery of women are used for the selling of products and popular media in general. Men are also objectified in the media, however, women experience this much more frequently. So sex discrimination continues to exist in numerous other ways and instances. Sexism today is by no means limited to subtle biases, and in many parts of the world, blatant sexism is not only still evident, but it is the law of the land. In the Qasim text, there is an example about how there is a law in Morocco that allows for male rapists to escape prosecution by marrying their female victims. However, in most Middle Eastern countries, if a woman is accused of a sexual crime, it will more than likely result in her execution. So moving on, how stereotypes distort perceptions and resist change. One way it resists change is through confirmation biases. Confirmation biases is based on the effect of the stereotypes on the individual. This involves people's tendencies to interpret, seek, and create information that seems to confirm their expectations. So stereotypes can be reinforced by the illusory correlation. The illusory correlation is an overestimate of the association between variables that are only slightly or not at all correlated. So stereotypes can sometimes create self-fulfilling prophecies, meaning those who are stereotypes can be led to actually behave in the stereotypes confirming ways. Other ways that stereotypes distort perceptions is through attributions and subtyping. People maintain their stereotypes through how they explain behaviors of others. These attributions can sometimes be flawed. When people see others acting in ways that contradict a stereotype, they may be more likely to think about situational factors in order to explain the surprising behavior. We consider the action or the person a mere exception to the rule. So, subtyping occurs when an image one has of an individual based on gender or ethnicity is compromised by the person in that group not acting in the stereotyped way. So people can subtype females by saying, oh, she's a diva if she comes off as high maintenance, or she's very cutthroat if the woman appears to be more strong attitude or very, not as emotional or feminine and soft as women are stereotyped to be. To continue on, so changing cognitions, cultures, and motivations. Motivations, norms, and values can and often do change over time. We look to our peers to acquire a sense of the local norms around us, including norms about stereotypes and prejudices. Popular culture, especially recently, has been a strong area of influence for change and advocacy to decrease feelings of prejudice. So I've only touched on a few issues and challenges when it comes to stereotypes and prejudice and discrimination. And to help improve one's thinking and not to fall into the form of thinking that fall under these categories, consider these options. So expose yourself or think about members of a group that is inconsistent with the stereotype. Also, believe that prejudice and can behaviors of prejudice can be learned and unlearned, and therefore it is moldable rather than a fixed, unchanging reality. And also, think that multiculturalism is inclusive of everyone, including the majority of the group. Just the different ideas of options to help one from falling into thinking of manners that fall under those three categories. So, as much emphasis as there has been on to improve the views of stereotypes, racism, and sexism, there have been some adverse effects which have arose. In an article we read this week, the ironic impact of activists' negative stereotypes reduce social change and influence, the author stated that despite recognizing the need for social change in areas such as social equality and environmental protection, individuals often avoid supporting such change. So, for this study, the researchers looked into how negative stereotypes of activists cause resistance against social change. The title of this article holds a key word: irony. Feminists and environmentalists were the activists studied, and regardless of what they stood for, they were seen as such eccentric and militant. Since there is a more negative stigma associated with these specific areas of social activism, the participants' willingness to adopt these behaviors to advocate for change was reduced. Even with social movements for change, stereotypes of certain groups who support certain movements can influence whether or not others will advocate for it. So, an area that falls underneath social activism and support and whatnot is having the sense of social identity. And one's social identity really does define what kind of activist groups he or she will support if they choose to support an activist group. And social identity theory posits that members to social groups serve to enhance and maintain self-esteem. And social identity can be based on a variety of factors, including which ethnic group one belongs to, socioeconomic status, or even the different interests an individual shares with others. Even music is a way of finding one's social identity since it is a form of self-expression. Another article we talked about or read about this week touched on how music really did define one's level of self-esteem and where they socially identify themselves or which groups they socially identify themselves with. So the taste in music in that study was reflective of self-esteem and showed some correlation to negative social behaviors if the music that person was listening to was, emphasizing or talking about acting in negative ways. So many of our youths today tend to be involved in social groups in which the members had similar tastes in music. So to conclude here, prejudice and discrimination operate not only on an individual level, but also on an institutional and cultural level. Ambivalent sexism is reflective of both benevolent and hostile sexism, which presents patronizing feelings in regards to women. Stereotyping can cause those in the stereotyped group to behave in ways that fall under that stereotype. Even though social movements for change are intended to increase support and positivity towards the movement, stereotypes towards activist groups negatively influence a person's desire to support a group. And finally, social identity is key for enhancing and maintaining one's self-esteem. So before I let you go here and to wrap things up, I want to leave you with a couple of discussion questions. So, number one, what are some current research findings that impact social identity among the youth, besides the article used for our readings? And do you believe the upcoming generations will be influenced by the same or similar factors, or social identity will solely depend on what is current to them? And number two, as Christians, there are endless stereotypes and negative stigmas against us. What are some ways we can help those stereotypes to be diminished? Use 2 verses from Scripture to support your answer. So really quick here, I just want to thank you all for watching my presentation, and I hope my information was helpful in regards to the different topics that we covered this week in our readings. And I'm really looking forward to reading your answers to the discussion questions. Thank you so much.